So Gutenberg, 1436, roughly. These are all rough numbers because they're kind of in between when they lived and when they died and when they did something important. Okay, so but around 1436, Gutenberg, Luther tags his declarations up on the wall in the area of 1517. So you get the sort of the Reformation and not quite the fall of the Roman Catholic Church yet, but you're sort of in that in that area. Then you get the science stuff start to happen. And that's kind of why I'm prefacing it this way today. Because you get Copernicus and Bacon and Kepler and Galileo. There's reasons those other guys are on there too. But especially Copernicus, who said roughly what? Yes?
We revolve around the sun.
Excuse me?
We revolve around the sun.
The universe does not revolve around us by saying we go around, okay? And that kind of changes pretty much like everything, okay? Because it pushes us out of the center of the universe. Kind of, I don't want to overstate this, but kind of goes with the printing press and Luther and helps further destabilize the church a little bit, because then that kind of destabilizes the Jesus story a little bit. Not altogether, but it was easier to think of the Son of God when the universe went around us. Then when the universe doesn't go around us anymore, then it gets a little bit harder to keep that in the right, not in the right, but in the same perspective that it had been presented that first 1,400 years. Okay, Kepler, right, says, "Oh wait," because at this point there's a lot of doubting, and quite literally the church says, "No, that's just not true," right? And they're in charge. So Copernicus said it, but essentially it's not accepted yet. Kepler says the math works. Now, folks have been looking at the stars since they've been looking, right? I mean, one of the first things they did was go, "Oh, look." And they've been working out how things move around. And Kepler did the math that verified what Copernicus had predicted, or proposed, if you will, right? So Kepler says, yeah, it's probably the case. There's math. Galileo contributes what? Besides insight. But what does he contribute?
Telescope.
Lenses and a telescope. Yeah. He gets the math right on the lenses. He's not the only one doing lenses. He's not the only one doing telescopes. But he gets the math right, so when you take it out, it works. The ratio's right between the lenses, so the bloody thing works. And that makes the observations a lot more accurate. And he says, yeah, you're probably right. For which the Pope drags him across the country and wants to excommunicate him and throw him in the clink and send him to an island and take away his children and his estates and everything else. But they work it out sort of so he doesn't lose all of that. But there's great fussing, right, over Galileo's concurrence with Copernicus. That brings us to the Cartesian split, which refers to René Descartes, who said, they responded in a chorus, I think, therefore I am. What the dickens does that mean? So we'll put that kind of in perspective. Descartes is a Roman Catholic, going to Jesuit school, very smart, in college, went through high school, college, goes to the Jesuit school every day, hears them still teaching essentially sort of behind the back of new science, but realizes that they're really good at it. I mean, he's smart and they're really good. Everything they say makes, really good sense. But he knows, because he's really smart and he's studying, and there's this other stuff, that this other stuff has kind of been going down for, 100 years. A little bit over 100 years, right? And they're still saying persuasively, no. So he says, I doubt it. I'm understating what he wrote, but he says, I doubt it. And by that he meant I doubt everything. Radical skepticism. I doubt it. I just don't believe it. I doubt it. Now, he's not saying that about the church. What he's saying it about, and he's very careful, is about science as it had been given at that point, which is what the church has been saying, but he doesn't put it that way. He says, the received scientific knowledge is probably faulty, because we haven't invented the scientific method yet, which he's going to do, right? Not invented, but put it forward. Bacon actually kind of started it. The other guys contributed, but there's this sort of thing that hasn't been regularized yet into what we would know as the scientific method. And Descartes' going to do that with materials he takes from these other guys, right? But before he does that, he says, so why would we do this? Well, because we got to doubt what we have. And how do I not doubt it? How do I know to not doubt it? Well, I'm going to start from tabula rasa, blank slate. I know one thing. I exist. I think, therefore, I am. Everything else, you got to show me. Now, if you can't show it to me, and you say I've got to believe it on faith, that's fine. I can do that. As long as it's about God and faith. As long as it's about religion, no problem. Tell me I got to believe it on faith, I'll believe it on faith. But if you tell me that's how the heavens go, the planets which we can now see, the stars which we can now see, how the plants grow and how the ocean works, and I'm not going to believe that on faith anymore. You're going to show that to me with science, or I'm not going to believe it. You get the scientific method and the Cartesian split. Subject of me, subjective, up here. Object, the physical world. Okay? And our world was built from that. What we know as modern Western life was built. Now, not the entire planet went that way, right? We got more people living in parts of the world who didn't read Descartes and didn't head that direction than the number of people who did. But we did. Western culture bought his explanation. Now, there was some opposition to this in addition to the church's opposition. But you got this real crescendo thing. I mean, it's really going, huh? Putting the bloody book on everybody's desk. Gutenberg thought it would be good for faith. And what it did was lead to the Reformation. Because you didn't need the priest to interpret the word anymore. You could read it for yourself. Now, whether, theologically, whether that's right or wrong, we'll have that argument someplace else. But that was the practical effect. You put that thing in everybody's lap, and a lot of the people went, oh, geez, I can read this, and I don't need that bloody priest to read it for me. And so then you get the Reformation, right? And then you get the universe doesn't go around us, and pretty soon you got a church that's not in charge anymore. Because now you got the scientific revolution come along and say, well, okay, if it's that stuff, go ahead, but everything else we're going to test. And then, it's almost like what the record companies did with downloading. If the church had kind of gone with it and figured out a way to go with it, it probably would have been better than saying, no! Which is what they said for a couple hundred years. Probably in some ways still say. And that makes it difficult to accommodate the two. So you have this split. And a couple hundred years here where folks have to write that way because they don't want to get in trouble with the church. Right? So he has to. Descartes has to write. That's essentially why he writes the way he writes, because he can get away with it that way. If we get out to Darwin. Darwin does the same thing. You know, the frontispiece of Origin of the Species is this apology that explains how you can write this stuff in the face of being Christian. Right? You got to keep them separate. So you get the Western mindset, which is science over here, technology, science, progress, and the humanities over here, subjectivity, emotion, no logic, feelings, as though it's true that we have a line down the center of our heads and there's two parts and they don't meet. And that's problematic because it's wrong. Now, actually, there was some stuff, Bacon did some stuff with what was known, you might have heard the term in Western, so faculty psychology. At this time, they actually kind of tried to work out which parts of the brain had which parts of the psychology in it, right? And we're not doing faculty psychology when we're testing brain parts anymore. We're actually testing synapse connections, right? But, so this all goes together to kind of say, well, we're compartmentalized up there. And, you know, the reasonable part, the rational part, the scientific part is the objective part. The unreasonable part, or the emotional part, the humanities part, the artsy-fartsy part, is the subjective part. And they're really not much connected. Okay? They really are sort of separate.